What do you think on the issue of climate? I don't know if you've paid attention to the Democratic debates at all, but it's come up uh, very few times, and I mean some of the questions that do get asked are so trivial. Um, I believe Greta Thunberg is now advocating for media outlets to refuse advertising dollars from fossil fuel companies. Uh, do you think that would make much of a difference in terms of the coverage that climate change receives?
Probably not, unfortunately.
Yeah.
For one thing, I mean, that could only happen, first of all, if there was a serious understanding of the urgency and scale of this threat. Without that, it wouldn't happen. And if you had that understanding, you wouldn't need it. I mean, the fact of the matter is there should be a screaming headline every day in the mainstream press about the fact that we're going off a cliff and we're not doing much about it. What Greta Thunberg is trying to get them to say. I mean, you probably listened to her talk at the COP25,
Mhm.
10-minute talk, very eloquent, very accurate, lots of details which were exactly accurate, very well said. But what can you say about a world in which a 16-year-old kid has to lecture the great figures of the world on their failure to address a threat that within not very long is going to undermine organized human life? We have to listen to a 16-year-old kid to tell us that.
Yeah, it's there has been uh, in the past decade a global rise of the far right, and it comes at just about the worst possible time during this what's deemed a make or break decade for climate change. The El Paso killer, the white nationalist who wrote a manifesto before the shooting, mentioned environmental catastrophe. And this has come up among a lot of far right figures now, and they're worried about mass migration. They have slogans like, save bees, not refugees. Uh, are you worried at all that if we don't do anything, there could be some kind of rise of what's sometimes called eco-fascism?
I, I mean, there's plenty to worry about the far right, but I don't think this is a major part of it.
Okay.
And
Uh,
there's much more to worry about the mainstream. What you said before about the Democratic debates, which incidentally I'll admit I don't watch, but I read about them. What you said is quite accurate. I mean, they're focused on impeachment for the crime of having the president having tried to harm a leading figure in the Democratic Party. That's the focus of the impeachment. That Trump used his office to try to get another government, Ukraine, to find harmful material about Joe Biden, the leading candidate in the Democratic Party. That's the issue, the big issue in the world. Incidentally, does that remind you of something? You recall an event called Watergate?
sure.
What was Richard Nixon charged with? Well, there were efforts by several congressmen, one of them Robert Reinen, a priest from Massachusetts, to include in the articles of impeachment some of Nixon's crimes, like the bombing of Cambodia, for example, which was a horrifying crime, all knocked out. The only issue that was left was that Nixon sent some petty thugs to break into the Democratic Party headquarters. That's the big issue with Richard Nixon. Big issue with Donald Trump is going after Joe Biden, Democratic Party candidate. And that's the lead issue that the Democrats are focusing on,
Right.
which incidentally will almost certainly turn into a gift to Trump. You can predict it. Senate is obviously going to exonerate him. He'll parade as with a triumph, we, the people, finally managed to undermine the deep state, the traitors who were trying to destroy the presidency. I could make up the propaganda easily. So it's very much like the Mueller report, which predictably and predicted was going to be a gift to Trump. So is this. That's what we focus on, not his attitude, not his policies on global warming, which are going to destroy us. That we barely talk about, and the press as well. Occasionally, in fact, it's kind of interesting to watch, to read the coverage in the best newspapers in the world. New York Times, London Financial Times, really serious newspapers. Just take a look at their coverage of fossil fuel issues. It's euphoric. The United States just passed Saudi Arabia in producing fossil fuels. That's great. Now we have energy independence, but we don't have other countries impeding our policies. The fossil fuel industry is investing more in very profitable fossil fuel extraction. Long, detailed articles. Try to find the word global warming in those articles. I mean, sometimes you read about environmental problems. So, long article in the New York Times by one of their best correspondents, Clifford Krauss, on Trump's expansion of fossil fuel exploration in the United States. And there is a mention of an environmental problem. At one point, he says that more drilling in Wyoming for fossil fuels may harm the local ranchers whose water supply may be affected. Might, but is that the big problem? I mean, it's as if it doesn't, I mean, they all know about it. It's not as if there's any lack of knowledge, just as the CEOs of the big banks know as much as we do about the threat of global warming, while they pour funds into fossil fuel extraction, including the most dangerous of them, like Canadian tar sands. It's as if there's some kind of schizophrenia. I mean, on the one hand, we know that we're destroying the possibilities for human life, and in the other half of our brain, that we can make some more money tomorrow. Again, it's pretty hard to find words to describe this.